Today we're going to pay homage to the man, James Earl Jones, and the greatest villain role he ever played.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
No, not that guy. He just voiced that guy. I'm talking about this guy.
We shall all drown in lakes of blood.
We're going to be using 5e mechanics to create Thulsa Doom, but there's a lot of RPG systems out there that are compatible with 5e or use that basic D20, so this should be easy to translate to other RPG systems out there. And this will be a part of a series of videos about BBEGs and the boss moves that I think they can make to make your game a little more interesting. If you have not seen Conan the Barbarian, you are missing out on one of the greatest fantasy movies of all time. And on top of that, James Earl Jones gives one of the best performances of a villain of all time as well. Now, we're not going to get into the details of who Thulsa Doom is, as the way that Robert E. Howard created him. Thulsa Doom in the movies is actually made from two different characters within his writings. So we're just going to focus on what we saw in the Conan the Barbarian movie. Now, throughout the movie, we're given a lot of different hints about who Thulsa Doom was in the past. We know that he was out searching for steel, right? He was also trying to determine what the riddle of steel was. So based on that, we know that he was probably some sort of fighter or some type of barbarian. In addition, there's that moment in that scene where he decapitates Conan the Barbarian's mom, but he does this gaze on her, basically essentially enchanting her. So we know that he has some form of enchantment magic as well. In addition, in order for you to have the kind of following that he has throughout the movie, he has all these peasants as well as all these warriors. I'm sure it's impossible for him to enchant everybody or charm everybody. So he really has to have a lot of high charisma in order to convince a lot of these people to follow him. So we have these three components we know based on what we hear or see throughout the movie. He has some type of barbarian uprising that has to do with the riddle of steel. We know that he's able to enchant or charm people based on that look that he gives. And we know that he has to be charismatic enough to control all the different people that show up at his temple. So let's go ahead and try to put together a stat block for Thulsa Doom. Now, when we see him in Conan's village, we see that he's almost a complete plated armor. I think it's more of a brigandine type of armor, but he's also carrying two daggers, but you don't see any huge sword with him, even though he's definitely in search of a sword. So we also see a couple of times in the movie him using a bow masterfully, right? He kills Conan's girlfriend, and in addition, he goes to try to kill the princess, and he's able to create these arrows from a snake. So this tells me that Thulsa Doom is probably a dexterity-based fighter, right? He doesn't seem to be very much of an aggressor. He definitely doesn't have the build of our barbarian. And so I think he's a fighter, a dexterity-based fighter, and uses the bow. Now, as I mentioned, he uses some type of enchantment magic, and of course, we know D&D has those. So I just put together Charm Person, Crown of Madness, and Dominate Person as three potential spells or three spells that I think he really should have. I mentioned earlier that he's probably a fighter, a dexterity-based fighter. We're going to leave him at level 2. And in order for you to cast that Dominate Person, you have to be an 11th level sorcerer. So I'm going to make him 11th level sorcerer. When you think about those hit points, or we use only averages, he's going to have 56 plus whatever constitution bonuses you want to give him. Or we can max him out at 82 plus whatever constitution bonuses you can give him. Another thing we need to think about, he can do all the enchantment spells, but we also see him transform into a giant snake. This tells us that he at least has to have the polymorph spell as well. So we're going to give him the polymorph spell, give him the stat block of a giant constrictor snake. Now, just for some flavor, I wanted to add a confusing gaze to make him a little more stronger. That means when a player goes up to try to attack him, he looks at you, you make a wisdom save, and if you fail, you have disadvantage with attacks against him just because he confused you. In addition, we have that longbow. It does 1d8 piercing in standard 5e mechanics, but we're going to add this serpent bites arrows, the arrows he creates from snakes, and basically it does an additional 1d8 poison damage every turn, and it cannot be stopped unless you have some type of lesser restoration potion or spell handy to help your character or whoever got hit by that arrow. And here's that Brigandine armor. It's only a 14 armor class. It's not that high, but that's okay. Now, if we put it all together, we're looking at Thulsa Doom stats here. We have a level 2 fighter, level 11 sorcerer. We gave him all these different spells. As we mentioned earlier, I'm going to max him out with those hit points. He has that Brigandine Army, 2 daggers that we can see, a longsword while he's riding his horse. And then we also have that longbow with the serpent arrows that he can shoot at people. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is not even a lot of hit points for a BBEG, but I think we're missing the point about BBEGs. Throughout that movie, there is really no way for anybody to reach him, right? And why is that? It's because he has an entourage, right? The entourage are Rex and Thorgrim. Rex and Thorgrim are his 2 main bodyguards or his captains. And in order for you to get to him, you definitely have to go through those 2 guys first. So what I did here is I basically created Thorgrim, his hammer. If you guys remember, that hammer is really badass. I think it's able to break a big old pillar of marble when they're fighting at the temple. So I'm going to give it a +6 to hit, 1d12 for that hammer, plus an additional 1d6 thunder damage on top of that. So it's really a 2 to 18 points of damage from a single strike, which makes sense. In addition, I gave it a special magic property, 1 charge per player. So this really allows you to use these guys and balance it out based on the number of players that are there. He does a thunder strike. He hits the ground. It has an AoE of 20 feet, DC 15 to save. If you don't save, you take 3d6 thunder damage and you get pushed back 10 feet and you fall prone. I know it seems a little OP, but this is the captain. In addition, we have Rexor. Now, Rexor, I guess in the movie, he actually uses the sword just a little bit more, but I really thought the battle axe was badass. It's a double-headed battle axe. So I decided to use the battle axe as his main weapon. He's going to have a +7 to hit, 1d12 +4 slashing. And then he's going to have this arcing attack that anybody within 15 feet of him in a cone shape is essentially going to has to make a DC 15 save or take the 1d12 +4 damage. Now, what about that other component we were talking about? We went over his barbarian or fighter stats. We went over the magic that he has. But now let's talk about his charisma. Now, this charisma is what's going to help this Thulsa Doom BBEG become even more powerful. With that charisma and essentially all these people surrounding him is going to make it very difficult for you to try to kill him. And these are all going to basically be minions. We talked about minions in the past. Minions tend to have very low hit points, typically 1 hit point, no bonuses to attack, very low damage, maybe 1 to 4. But you really can't reach Thulsa Doom without going through his minions. On top of that, his regular soldiers that he has. And remember, his 2 captains. And what else does Thulsa Doom have? He has the Mountain of Power, right? His BBEG layer. Now, it's going to be very difficult to attack Thulsa straight on at that tower, right? So, in the movies, they tell us about a secret passage in the back of the mountain that essentially Conan and his 2 compadres climb up, sneak in, and go through the very cavernous or many cave systems of Mount Doom. Again, you really want to progress that story. So you don't really want to stop them from doing that. You make these stealth checks really easy. In fact, you can actually hand wave and say all these people are distracted by what's going on inside them as they continue to follow some of the soldiers because these guys are practicing cannibalism. They go start following them and they get to essentially what becomes a room of paradise, right? We see Conan, he gets the big eyes, and these guys are having a good time. So what do these 3 people do? They basically fudge it up for everybody. And essentially, in order to capture that princess, they start attacking everybody and essentially destroy the party. Party poopers, right? The one last thing I wanted to say is we know that Robert E. Howard actually described Thulsa Doom as a type of undead lich in that. So very old school, 1936. So even before Vecna, there's actually Thulsa Doom. Now let's forget for a moment that Thulsa Doom is actually a mixture of his 2 different characters in his books. But essentially what we're going to do is if you really want to use Thulsa Doom as he is and pretend that Conan was actually part of your world potentially, you just take Thulsa Doom and you make them a lich as well, right? Every lich has a phylactery. Maybe it's sitting somewhere, it didn't get destroyed. And just like Vecna or other famous people in Lord of the Rings, let's say, he makes a comeback. starts gaining power again, and it's really up to your heroes to take him down. And so what we're looking at here is basically the total breakdown of Thulsa Doom, his captains, the minions, the layers. I recommend maybe you take a snapshot of this screen here, keep it for yourself. You build upon that. But this, I think, gives you the framework for Thulsa Doom, and you should be able to pull him into any RPG system. And of course, I want to give a shout out to James Earl Jones. Rest in peace, of course. I have so many memories from you. Just thank you for the memories. Thank you for Thulsa Doom.
They shall all drown in lakes of blood. Now they will know why they are afraid of the dark. Now they will learn why they fear the night.
Robert E. Howard for creating a character that could be portrayed by someone like James Earl Jones very masterfully. And that's it, everybody. I just wanted to show you how to create Thulsa Doom using some 5e mechanics, but you can take those mechanics or those stat blocks that I created and essentially use any RPG system with them, doing some modifications here and there. And hopefully this was very useful for you and potentially something you can use for your game in the future. I'm Don Franco 3. This is RPG Boons, where we talk about everything RPG and how everything is RP. Please hit the subscribe button if you like the cut of my gibberish. Leave a comment. I'll get back to you. Until then, peace out, James Earl Jones. Thank you.
That is strength, boy. That is power. The strength and power of flesh. What is steel compared to the hand that wields it?